afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our crypto, NFT, and Web3 brand builder. My name is Jay Fenster. I'm the corporate marketing manager at OUTFRONT, and I'll be moderating today's event. Here, we'll share how blockchain brands are using out-of-home to establish trust and how legacy brands are using it as a gateway to the metaverse. Our goal for today is for you to come away feeling inspired to leverage out-of-home for your own goals, because at OUTFRONT, it's our mission to help people, places, and business grow stronger. We've got a lot of expertise on our panel today. Joining us to talk about how and why out-of-home works for blockchain, we have Victoria Mottesheard, Vice President Marketing for New York and the East Region. Then Head of Cultural Relevance, Max Siegelman, will take us on a deep dive into the Metaverse, no Oculus required. Then we'll have a Q&A featuring this month's spotlight advertiser, fintech brand Gemini. Representing Gemini through their agency of record Junction 37 is founder and CEO Chris Pyne. At the conclusion of our moderated panel, we will open up the floor to audience questions. If you have any questions for our panelists, feel free to ask using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We will answer as many as we have time for at the conclusion of today's event. And with that, I will hand it over to Victoria.
Thanks, Jay. So we'll just dive right in. We've got a lot to cover. Today, we're going to talk about reaching your audience, industry trends, and then how and why out-of-home gets results. And as Jay mentioned, Max will do a deep dive into the Metaverse, and Chris is going to share the amazing work that they've done with Gemini. So to get right into it, let's kick off with reaching your desired audiences. And wanted to stop and feature this photo right here, leading with an amazing photo here of the New York City subway station domination at Atlantic Avenue and Barclays Center for Discord, a leading community platform which reached the masses, driving them to engage and join the conversation in communities that they care about. So what is the state of Web3? The pandemic accelerated a strong need to connect, as well as several technological advancements. So combine those two, and you have this accelerated momentum into crypto, NFTs, and Web3. So with NFTs, they continue to grow as the vehicle of distribution and ownership of which more and more digital products are traded. Moving down to Web3, it's decentralizing the internet, providing the power with the users and the content in which they create. And then what we're really noticing is how brands are embracing the Metaverse. And we see these conversations daily about how brands are engaging with these communities in new ways, of which we'll share some of those examples later on in the presentation. So how do we reach your audience and bring your digital brand or digital investment to life? So on the roads, total miles up are 7% year over year. And with that, 80% of consumers say that they're noticing out of home on highways and on local roads. So with that, 70% talk about the out of home ads that they see on road trips. So extending the viewership beyond the post and into conversation. And with the increased adoption of QR codes, out of home is now more interactive than ever before. So over the past year, the growth of QR codes has grown over 400%. And as noted last year, 11 million households have used QR codes to make payments, so signifying the action associated with purchase. And in fact, 3 in 4 people say they're eager to use QR codes in the future. So with that being said, QR codes have had a dramatic success, especially in our transit environments, where commuters have long dwell time and devices at their fingertips, as you can see from this gentleman here in the photo. And QR codes aren't the only action that out-of-home drives. In fact, nothing drives digital activation like out-of-home. So through a recent ComScore study, dollar for dollar, out-of-home drives more digital activation of all kinds over any other medium. 7 times the social posts, over 5 times the online purchases, and nearly 5 times the website visits and beyond. So out-of-home inspires people to take their phones out and engage with that next secondary action, which meets clients' KPIs. So now let's explore some of that macro trends that shape the industry right now. So again, pausing on this great photo here, the Beast in Times Square, which is running a Gucci partnership featuring the digital art marketplace for Super Rare. This online gallery allows the purchase of artists using cryptocurrencies and non-fungible tokens associated with the artworks. So again, driving that action online. So in a recent Mintel report, respondents shared the activities of interest engaging with the metaverse. And as expected, the top interests include socializing, playing video games, sightseeing, learning, shopping, and attending events. So for brands to connect with not only the current communities that they currently interact with, but extending that reach and driving down even further to get new consumers, really awareness and trust is critical, especially for these digital first brands. So extending the awareness to a larger population and building the trust for users to take that next step and engage. And this creates legitimacy for brands. Secondary, the time is now for digital brands to connect with people in real life and build audiences. We've been craving these in real life interactions and experiences, but still want to hold on to those authentic communities that with like-minded communities and conversations that we built during the pandemic. So of which the rise in conversation platforms like Discord and Reddit have really been driving. And then third, conveying value through interest. So elevating positioning and perceptions of experience and interest, bridging that gap in the real world to drive meaningful conversations in the virtual world. So who's doing it? What are the vertical and brands that have been early adopters? So you can look here, just a couple examples: luxury fashion brands, retail brands, which include footwear, clothing, sports brands, CPG in the food and beverage space, live concerts or live events, especially in the concert arena, entertainment, including streaming, and spirits, specifically along with different events going on. So now let's get into why and how out-of-home gets results. So while the lines between our digital and virtual and physical lives continue to blur, we see digital burnout and fatigue rise. The majority, 63% of us, are feeling the effects of digital burnout. And even more, 75% are skipping ads, making it harder for advertisers to break through digitally or with other traditional methods. So on top of that, over half of the consumers are actively trying to decrease their screen time, and it's becoming clear that audiences are ready to spend less time in front of screens and more time engaging in real experiences outside the home. But again, we're talking about digital brands. So what does this mean? Although this speaks less time on our devices per se, consumer interest is piqued by this new virtual world. And combining the in real life experience of the out of home with the URL experience in Web3 makes for the perfect recipe to drive action and engagement. So out of home, it's currently seeing a heightened awareness, a rise in trust, and an increased ability to drive action. 70% of consumers have an increased awareness and appreciation in the out of home space. 66% are taking some sort of mobile action after seeing the out-of-home ad. Maybe it's because more consumers trust out-of-home more than any other medium, with the trust skewing even higher with the younger generations. Again, aligning perfectly with this new digital world, of which skews to the younger generation as well. And then consumers are not just noticing out-of-home, they're engaging with it too. They notice out-of-home ads and lead to online activation. So in fact, almost 9 in 10 say that the out-of-home ad produced an engagement, whether that be visiting a website, scanning a QR code, and beyond. And again, younger generations are even more active. So a recent DigiDay article shared that billboards seem too static for a digitally native industry like crypto, but some say it's a way to build trust and awareness in a category fraught with skepticism. That was a quote from the article from the writer. And then additionally, an amazing quote by our friends at Gemini. This was from the global head of brand and marketing. You can introduce a brand to the world with out-of-home and sell products, making it a fantastically powerful medium for the cryptocurrency and even urban theater. So with more competition in this space, out of home is a key driver to consider. And here's just one example. Coca-Cola recently shared their dream world experience through out of home, including our OUTFRONTX, which you can see at the top. It's spatial creative opportunity that they did through 3D messaging. Again, bringing that URL virtual world in the real life for consumers to engage back in the virtual world. So really just shows the connectivity between Web3 and out of home. Another great example here is through Acumen. So consumers are not just noticing out of home, but they're engaging with it. So Acumen ran in Times Square for a charity auction and swiftly raised $35,000 from the sale of NFTs, which they got to through that QR code. So again, taking that action, scanning, and then purchasing. And then my last example, this is a campaign that ran for Artifacts. They used the Times Square takeover to introduce the brand to the world and showcase the available art. So the campaign was picked up, had significant amplification against social as well as press, which led to client success. So at Outfront, we are the most visible media platform in the United States, reaching 70% of the population weekly with a powerful medium with platforms across 651,000 assets across the country. Out of home is woven into the fabric of our communities, and I would like to say both in real life and digitally. And it's always on, has the power to share public discourse with immense cultural impact, of which Max will dive into in a little bit. And then our mission here at Outfront is to deliver impactful and engaging interactions with audiences as they live their lives. This is achieved through what we call TLC. So utilizing our sophisticated technology to increase consumer engagement, to targeting audiences where they are, have been and will be, and using big, bold, beautiful creative to drive out of home. So with that, I will hand it over to Max and just kick off the conversation with, how do you see the metaverse being a part of the brand strategy for our clients? But then in addition to that, how does it fit into our offerings from an out-of-home standpoint?
Yeah, thanks, Vic. I think a lot of what you talked about makes sense. So I think I'll start with the overarching concept that the metaverse at this point is still changing and people are still figuring out. I think we see a lot of brands who are getting involved with it and creating their own either worlds within these gaming environments, whether it's Super League and Roblox or elsewhere, where traffic already exists because these games are already existing and taking place there. I think when these brands are building these different environments and these different experiences, they're allowing other traffic from other in-game experiences to come over to experience theirs. So I think, again, my overarching piece, it is forever changing. I think where we have a really upper hand is, like you said, is our assets exist in places where culture is always taking place. You go outside, you see us, you're not scrolling past us. I think the QR code quickly adopted through the pandemic, though existed for a long time, to create that interaction with out of home has really sped up the process for us. So I think at its simplest form, what we can do is offer consumers kind of a peek into what some of these metaverse or in-game environments look like through our digital assets, especially when they're built out like the Coca-Cola example, with spatial, to really get that three-dimensional spatial feel and depth of it. I think where we see that we continue to be fit is we actually were a part of one of the first out-of-home NFT auctions, where we displayed different artwork on different digital assets throughout the country during the pandemic. So people weren't traveling to Atlanta where the actual exhibit was being hosted, but they had the opportunity to scan QR codes on different digital assets that we had throughout the country to actually purchase that artwork right from there. So I think we're in a really interesting spot as in being embedded in culture to be a part of these. we always talk about that mama, I made it moment of different music artists or actors seeing themselves up in bright lights on billboards and other assets for the first time, and creating that social awareness where they're going out and they're posting it on their socials. But this really gives, whether they're brands or NFT projects or big brands doing metaverse builds, an opportunity to get in front of a huge audience and keep giving back to their community with these different experiences. I think a key piece of what you said a lot of in the past slides is community. And that's what a lot of these different NFT projects are based on. And I know we're talking about a bunch of different stuff from NFTs and Metaverse and other, and there are a lot of differences, but there are some similarities. But at its core, the community is the most important to an NFT project. So for an NFT project to be able to have their online community, they also really want to give back to these different activations in real life. So if you look at even South by Southwest last year, and you look at one of the more successful NFT projects, DOOH, their biggest events every year are in real life events. So I think it again speaks to that somewhat tangible in real life moment and opportunity that they're giving their community members. And we're offering that additional layer or piece to their community and the rest of the consumer base and traffic going by our assets. So it's a very long-winded answer to kick off that first question, but there are a lot of different layers that I think go into this. But I think the biggest piece for us as Outfront is community is always number one, whether it's an NFT project, a metaverse experience, or other. And I really think that we live in these different communities, so we really have an upper hand at how we can benefit these different projects and these different experiences for these brands building out these activations.
Great, thanks, Max. Jay, I think you were going to run through some topics with our special guest as well.
Sure. Thank you, Vic. And thank you, Max, for that dive into the metaverse. So right now, we are joined on our panel by Chris Pyne of Junction 37, the agency of record for cryptocurrency brand Gemini. Welcome again, Chris, and thank you for joining us. So first question for you. In Gemini's first out-of-home campaign, the brand introduced itself with ads designed to educate its audience and establish its brand. What were the key objectives and messages of that campaign?
Well, it was pretty simple, because if you think about 2018 and what's happened since 2018 to now, crypto as well as the metaverse and Web3 has just exploded. Back in 2018, believe it or not, Bitcoin was over 20 years old. And most people's understanding of cryptocurrency, exchanges, Web3, etc., was what I would say foggy at best in terms of an understanding of that. People have maybe heard of it around that time in 2017. There'd been a big kind of boom of Bitcoin and the introduction of meme coins like DOOH. That was a famous one. And, you know, it was at the precipice of basically hitting mainstream. So at that point in 2017 and 2018, you have enterprise investors that were really starting to investing in and doing deals and currency exchanges and crypto exchanges at that time. So we were right on the precipice. At that time, Coinbase, which I'm sure everybody on this call has heard of, had been around for a good few years in 2012 when it first started. And that was recognized as kind of the OG of all crypto exchanges. But then a couple of years afterwards, Gemini was founded by Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss. That followed in 2015, but it had no awareness. So to answer your question very quickly, it's about gaining awareness as quick as possible, but gaining that awareness among a really important audience. Because really what the first campaign was used to do was really to announce that this was a place where institutional investors, enterprise investors, as well as your kind of, you know, Oregon-based day traders could come and actually trade with crypto. And the challenge with that was that, you know, the investment, the tech community, the fintech community, while many are on the button, as it were, and very aware of what's going on, there's a whole bunch of people trying to clamor for attention at that time. So the reality for us was to say that, hey, Gemini is here, it's regulated, and it's in line with US rules in terms of financials. It's here, and this is the place to actually come and start trading. So the process behind this was basically to try and put as much in the face of those institutional or investment community as possible. So the process behind the messaging was really to make a bold announcement that the future of currency is here, that the future of crypto is here. And, you know, with that, we decided that out of home would be our lead medium to help us do this because of the locations, but also because of the way it can intercept people at the point of when they can be highly engaged to that. And what I mean by that was we started our activity with speaking to various different landlords. We spoke obviously with OUTFRONT and a number of other out-of-home vendors to try and find the best kind of places and spaces in which we could put our message. And so, you know, that we initially started by speaking to various different landlords in Southern Manhattan to help create impactful windowscapes in and around the financial area of New York City. And in a space where particularly that the community just couldn't miss. And so one example of that is the New York Stock Exchange. So as you can imagine, all of the people going to work every day in the stock exchange, right opposite the window in the building, right opposite, we were the first advertiser in there to actually get our message in the forefront, in the very center of the financial world in the US. From that, we very, very quickly followed with doing other areas in which we could intercept our consumers, obviously buses, taxis, subways, street furniture, all of the above in various different parts of the country and in terms of and financial parts of the country. So things like buses traveling around each of the cities, which also we would use to host small events where the Winklevoss twins would host people when in conferences and things like that, to boats in Miami, to rotundas in San Francisco, and wallscapes and all of the above. So it was very much the main driver of any kind of awareness at that time for all of our activity. And to kind of show you what that did, our awareness increased quite significantly overnight. We went from pretty much 0 to 25% awareness in the community. Our consideration increased 5-fold. Our purchase intent increased at least 3-fold. So those kind of things and the use of out of home was actually helping us drive kind of the lower funnel Google, you know, App Store kind of things for installs and actually activations. So, you know, what we've basically seen is out of home has been a great driver of lower funnel efficiencies. So there really is a connection between using out of home as a medium and actually getting proper and good return on investment.
All right. Well, let's jump into that the second out of home campaign. That second out of home campaign was in support of Gemini's credit card, and it incorporated NFTs themselves in order to appeal to blockchain aficionados. And it used an aspirational message to activate an audience beyond just crypto enthusiasts. How did that second campaign differ from the first?
Well, we're fast forwarding a few years now. So obviously, after the launch in 2018, it became very much mainstream in terms of understanding what crypto is. And there were millions and millions of people who were picking up in that space and buying, and everything was fine and dandy in terms of getting into that space. But where we kind of netted out was the fact that it was still a place where there was a smaller number of people that were playing it. And really where our second out of home campaign came from was the idea about creating a financial product which could appeal to the masses, as it were. And that was a Gemini credit card, which was launched earlier this year. And as part of owning one of these credit cards, you could get crypto back instead of your cashback rewards. And instead of it limiting to like $25 with the big guys, you know, you get a significant amount of cashback rewards from that. So from our perspective, it was not just adding awareness, but it was broadening our overall appeal to a more mainstream audience. So, you know, we saw all kinds of activity that we did, and we basically split the campaign into kind of two parts. One which was a standard creative, which was very much about, here's the card, and if you get a little bit of crypto back at this stage, it could be worth something in the future. I.e., at that stage, you know, a fractional part of Bitcoin before the summer this year, a fractional part of Bitcoin was worth a heck of a lot of money. So across the board we used the big format stuff in places like, as you see here, downtown LA, in Dallas, in all of the major crypto centers across the country, Silicon Valley, even Portland, Oregon, Seattle, a number of different places. And the second part of our campaign around the whole piece was around the creative idea, which was, what's the best that can happen? So again, a small amount of crypto back in terms of rewards for your card could actually in a few years be worth a heck of a lot more. So we started to go down the side of using NFT. And I think the team have brilliantly put together this whole idea of making art, not ads. And also the acquisition of Nifty Gateway by Gemini made it also very easy for us to start working with the NFT community, because they're notoriously difficult to work with in a lot of ways. So the other part of the campaign was very much focused on those executions that you kind of see in the bottom right hand of the screen there, of saying you could invest in a lawnmower now, but in the future it could become a Lamborghini, etc., etc. So it was a really nice creative twist where we were using the big standard static format stuff for just basic awareness, and here's our product, and then other ways in which we could use NFTs to their fullest effect to grab people's attention through motion-based stuff.
So you've used a mix of digital and static assets for Gemini's campaigns. What's the rationale for each?
Its location is everything for us. I think everybody on this call knows, and particularly when it comes to out of home, you've got to find the best places and spaces for people, the right people to see it, but also to drive that level of trust that Vic talked about a little bit earlier. Okay, so the most important thing for us is that we think of the location first, and then we think of what is the best creative to fill it. And so the more that we did with that, you know, our digital assets were very much NFT focused because they involved motion, and the static takeovers were very much focused towards the product and the tangible aspects of that product.
So Gemini used some unorthodox media formats to create ownable moments. What were the tactics there?
So, you know, along with the big stuff, there's also the stuff that I believe kind of really engages with people above and beyond the standard stuff. You know, what I really like is the idea of, you know, we showed some wallscapes earlier, but there's some stuff that local communities kind of expect. Like in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen here, you can see that boat. The boat in Miami, for those of you who know Miami, it's the home of crypto in the US, if not one of the homes in the world. You know, that goes up and down the Miami River and around South Beach and all of those kind of areas. It's been very, very effective for us. Things like the Windward Walls within Miami, things like projections on iconic buildings around New York, Dallas, Houston, all of the centers where our target audience are, but also some elements where we were, I would say, either brave enough or silly enough to start putting projections next to things like Coinbase ads. So we would kind of put ourselves kind of up against them and say, this is, you know, a credit card by Gemini, and you can get great cash back and rewards from that. To the point where we also did some crazy stuff, particularly on the West Coast, which is notoriously difficult in some areas to get some really good eyeballs in, for us. So when people were flying into LAX, picture on the middle or the top right, we actually put fluorescent tape on buildings as people flew into LAX so that they could see our message on top of that. So those kind of things can be quite cost efficient, and they can be very, very impactful. I think from that, a very good example is what we did during Art Basel as well. So we did a piece of content on that little boat that you see, actually using an NFT. And believe it or not, yes, it's called the merge. That's what it does. It was those 5 seconds. We put it on the boat and we put it around. As you can see, those tents there are where Art Basel was having like its VIP section, and that we just had that parading around. And we use these alternative formats in complement to the big stuff that's going to get a lot of eyebrows. But this particular one, this NFT was sold at auction within 15 minutes of us putting it on this boat for $91.8 million. So I wish I'd have got a cut of that. The ROI was pretty darn good on that piece, but when put in the right place with the right message and the right partners, it can be very, very effective.
Given that cryptocurrency has a very specific niche audience, what was the strategy behind the locations in which you selected to advertise?
Well, I kind of touched on it a little earlier that like initially it was about being where the core crypto investor is and the, and being around financial areas. But, I think where it's become, we're very much focused on, from an out of home perspective, we are focused on being where we know that community is. And the most interesting thing over the last 4 years is that that community has changed so significantly. It used to be, a young guy working at an investment bank in New York City, but now it gets that person plus a day trading Redditor in Oregon. So what we've had to do is there are certain media that we just can't afford to use absolutely everywhere, but making the right impact in the right space that we find that just feels really good and different and fresh is how we do it.
And finally, what were the KPIs by which you measured success for your candidates?
The only KPI that our client ever mentions is ROAS. But realistically, we have a lot of conversations, and particularly with this client, about the fact that awareness was key 4 years ago. Awareness continues to be key, especially with the hundreds of millions of dollars that have been spent in this space. So ultimately, helping the owners of the company understand that there's a return on awareness that drives efficiency, that drives return on awareness on investment is the kind of key thing for it. So that's what we're really measured on, and we're held to it too.
All right. Well, that's all the questions that I have for you, Chris. Now we'd like to open up the floor for our audience. If you have any questions for Chris or for any of our other panelists, please submit them via the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. And first question, I'll direct this one to Max. What are some brands that are doing cool things in the metaverse right now? Max, you're muted.
Sorry, I think we saw a lot of fashion brands kind of take a step forward during this past fashion week and did a bunch of metaverse fashion shows. Fashion's obviously a huge one because if you're a gamer, you can obviously buy wearables in games where you're wearing Balenciaga hat or Balenciaga shoes and running around Fortnite, and you're actually paying to wear those products. So fashion, obviously big. We saw a Bud Light execution a few months back where they basically just built this like Western vibe bar within a Roblox environment where you could go with your friends, and it was more of a community building thing. So I think when I say like the metaverse is still trying to figure out what it is, and it's still forever changing, I think we see some of these brands who are jumping in, having these really cool opportunities, and then there's always the what's next. So I think those things are super important to think about also. But I think we see like iHeartLand within Roblox doing really amazing stuff. And they have a full content calendar that continues and has different music artists come in and has different brands working with them within their metaverse environment of iHeartLand. So that one to me is one of the more successful ones that we see on an ongoing basis.
All right. Next question. This one I think is best suited for Chris. What advice would you give to a crypto or NFT brand looking to advertise out of home for the first time?
Put trust in it. You know, it is the best place, no matter how big your budget is, to make an impact if you do it in the right places and spaces. Find something that's cool, find something that feels really good, but like ultimately it's not a leap of faith. We've proved that it's been able to work for us in a lot of instances, and a lot better than just the standard lower funnel Googles and Facebooks of the world. So have faith.
Have faith. That's good advice. Okay, so that's all the questions that we have from our audience today. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. I'd like to also thank each of our panelists for sharing their time and expertise. We will be sending out the recording of this webinar to everybody, so you will be able to share it with your friends, watch it again, enjoy it a second time. Thank you everybody for joining us, and have a wonderful day.